Good morning and welcome to Calgary Business Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Wazny, and for episode number 378, I've got Dr. Veronica de la Rosa. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
You're
You
in
did.
the studio. Your studio looks a lot nicer than mine. You got a plant back there and very comfortable.
Well, yeah, it's nice. I do a lot of work online with my clients because my business is basically it's an online business. So I think it's just nice for everybody.
So do you prefer Dr. De la Rosa, Veronica, or Doc?
Oh, you can call me Veronica or Dr. V, whatever is easier for
Dr.
you.
V, that could be so Gary Vaynerchuk, somebody I've been following for the last 4 years. He goes by Gary V. So Dr. V will compete with it. We can put that out
Oh,
there.
yes, that's right, Gary V.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not to be confused with Gary V. This is Dr. V. But let's just talk Veronica. We'll talk Veronica. And then when it comes to, the work you've done, let's just start with introduce yourself and then we'll go from there.
Well, first I want to say thank you for having me here because I do believe in the power of networking. In the power of networks, I think networks drive our lives, and there is no such a thing as a self-made man or a self-made woman. And just the opportunity to be here to share with your community, to invite you to my community as well. That is just, I love that. I love the power of networks.
Well, my two listeners, thank you for that, and hopefully we'll expand it 3 or 4.
I'm sure you have more than 2 listeners, and I just want to say that my story is a little bit of proof of that, of the power of networking.
Yeah.
Because you and I have chatted a little bit about this, but let me tell your listeners a little bit about my story.
Well, I like the background because the backdrop is, and I think I'm going to just share this with you because I was overseas for 20 years, and you and I talked a little bit offline.
Yes.
And I came back to Calgary after my home city, and 3 years ago, I was a new immigrant to Canada to Calgary, to my street. I was a new immigrant, so I want you to go there because I think that is what, that's your story. That's your shtick, if you want to call it, but that is why we're having this conversation today. So please.
Yes. As you and your listeners may can tell right away, I'm an immigrant, right? I have an accent. I have a Hispanic accent. I'm originally from Mexico.
Right.
And I embrace it now, but it was hard when I was first here. When people don't understand what you're saying, right? And there's people who are very kind and just say, hey, can you repeat that? And there's other people who was like, I don't understand. And they just, brush you off. And so that was hard. I arrived to Canada 10 years ago. And I'm, as I mentioned, I'm originally from Mexico, where I was a professor in one of the highest ranked universities in the country before I came here. Right. I was working as a consultant in a law firm. And
so that's very humbling. Think about you. That's very humbling. You come here with a degree, the pedigree, right? Not a pet. You didn't bring any pets, but you came with the pedigree, right? And literally, the humbling, like, you had to come right. I don't know where you went to, but I mean, literally, it drops you down a surface to a level or a level or two.
Yes, and you know what? People in Mexico thought, and even here when I was arriving, that I was crazy because I was on my way to make full-time professor.
Yeah.
Right, in this very reputable university. But I just listened to my inner voice. And I came here and I was so happy to be here, in this beautiful country where I thought that I was absolutely sure that countless possibilities will be opening to me.
Well,
because
if you go back to 10 years ago, okay, so I'm going back 20 years. Last time I was in Mexico was 20 years, and the peso was like 7-1. What's it now? Just out of curiosity, what's it today?
It's 16 pesos for $1.
Okay, so it's
Mexican pesos for $1.
Yeah, I mean, that was a long time ago, but so I mean, you came to Canada. I mean, most Canadians fly to Mexico for holidays, so you came the other way. You were the reverse
you get a lot for your
snowbird.
bank, but it was the other way around here, right? I was using all my savings, but my savings were reduced to whatever it was at that time. I want to say it was maybe 12 or 14 or something around there.
Sure.
Right. So automatically, that was one of the things, right? That I almost never talk about this, but you have a very good point. It was just a monetary thing too, right? Because I came in here, I had a solid background and a lot of experience. I was an international trained lawyer. I had a specialization in international law, a master's degree, a PhD. I spoke 3 languages. And yet it was hard.
So Spanish, French, and English.
Yes. I did part of my PhD in France. So, and I had working experience in law firms as an in-house lawyer for government agencies, post-secondary education,
Yeah.
right? So I was so excited to start my life here. And I didn't realize things were going to be way harder than I imagined.
Well, so let's start with that because okay, so I understand the language. I understand. I was 19. I was in Moscow, 1995, 1996, and an Australian came. So this is the reverse. An Australian came, Joe Watt, and he did a course on Ernst and Young, audit innovation. I couldn't understand him. I was a native English speaker, and Joe was like this twangy Australian. 15 years later, I saw Joe probably go in Moscow, whatever it was in 2012 or something like that. Whatever, I can't remember the date. He slowed down his pronunciation. So that puts in context a foreigner comes into a language. So I understand that. So what did you do? I mean, how did you overcome that? I mean, sounds like it took some time, but what did you do?
Well, it took some time, and I did speak English. I have been taking English classes since I was in kindergarten, and yet it was hard, right? It was hard to. I could hear myself making mistakes. I do still, but it was just after the fact, right? So like, oh, I just said that was wrong, but at the beginning I couldn't even hear that.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're a PhD professor or professor of law coming out of Mexico. That didn't come across and say, here we go. You couldn't waive that paper.
I was waving that paper, but yet it was hard. It was harder than I thought.
Yeah.
Right. And every time a door closed, my self-confidence got a dent.
Yeah.
Right. Until it was very chipped. Chips everywhere, right? Then you start.
Did you get a painter to help you? Someone fill in those gaps?
Yes, I did actually. It was a lot of work. I was my own painter actually, and I did help. I did get help. I did a lot of inner work. I got support, right? Because I don't think I could have probably done it on my own. That's why I'm saying the power of networks, the power of support, the power of having external support and help to help
the inner
you.
voice. You said the inner voice. You said, sorry to cut you off. The inner voice brought you to Canada. So did you go back to the inner voice? Why did you bring me to Canada? I mean, so you came.
Yes, of course. There's times that you're going to wonder, am I doing the right thing? Right? Is this, am I just making the right decision? And then you have to get and listen and remember why you were here and what did you wanted to accomplish. And right. And then is when you have to start. There was a point when I decided if I really wanted this, which I did,
yes,
then I have to work and I have to have a plan and I have to set my goals and I have to just reach out to the resources that I needed to get where I wanted to get.
Okay, so let's go back then to those 10 years ago, and you some rejection, some doors are closing. What did you do? Like for the listeners or people that are probably in a similar situation, what do you recommend? Step 1 or step 29 or whatever.
Step 1 or step 29. Well, the first thing I recommend is to stop and take a pause and just think about what you really want. Because it might sound cheesy, but you have to tap into your dreams and just remember why you're here. But you need to make a pause, because if you don't do that, then you get overwhelmed because so many things are happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So the first thing will be just like really listen to your inner voice and that intuition that we have. We know what we want. We know when your body's telling you when something is not right, but we very rarely listen to that. So that will be where I start. And then once you pause and you really listen, opportunities to start coming up depending on what you want. And then that's the other part, right? Like you have to take action, because if you don't take action, then you'll never get anywhere.
Okay, so there's some sort of over the macro view, but now the micro view is the first step. The first step you went, I mean, I don't know, do you want to go step by step, but it's really that, the doors were closing. How did you open some doors? And you said the network, was it the Mexican network, the Spanish, Latino?
You keep on knocking on doors, one close, that's the truth. And you're entrepreneur, and your community is made of entrepreneurs. The doors were closing for me. And what do? I mean, we tend to just panic when doors start closing.
Sure.
And I think you've probably been there. I think many of your listeners have been there. And then
Rejection's
either
high.
you just,
Rejection, the word is, rejection, right? There's a rejection when someone says the door closes, that's a rejection. And some people take it personal and it is defeating. And they'll take it personal and it really becomes, I mean, that's where I've had a few doctors or mental health or psychologists on my podcast talking about those issues. But you didn't take that step. You went and found your inner self. And so you went to what was the next door you opened? What was that?
the next door I opened, I got a job teaching here in Canada, right?
Nice.
And it was just the opportunity, but you have to be ready for opportunity. I was very lucky because the opportunity opened, but by the time the opportunity opened, I was ready. And I just keep on knocking doors. Like you have to step over rejection, but sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes you need how to do it. You need to get the support.
So you've been teaching. Okay, so I want to go this. This could be a different discussion, but literally, you've been teaching for 10 years. Imagine how many students you've talked to, you've impacted, influenced, or just they rejected you, whatever it is. Like, but imagine all those kids and how many would you say off the top of your head over 10 years? How many students?
Oh, well, I haven't been here teaching for 10 years.
Oh, okay.
I've been on and off teaching here.
Yeah.
But I think it's been maybe 500 students.
Wow. Right.
Right.
So if you hadn't come to Mexico, if you hadn't come from Mexico, so if you hadn't come from Mexico, those 500, they would have had a different professor teaching them. So you're impacting in one way, shape, or form. So your message,
yes,
that's not even your.
And I think it's good for people who are immigrants to see that you can do it, right? Like it's hard work and it's mindset, and that is I created a system. I created a system to start just it wasn't easy, but I now know how to beat that lack of self-confidence and how to work. And that's what I work on self-confidence now. I work on empowering women mostly to boost their self-confidence. But when I was preparing this, is like it's not only women, it's everybody who's immigrant, because you mentioned it yourself, right? Do you remember
I'm a different type of immigrant. I'm a white Canadian Calgary immigrant who's still, literally still fighting that, the mindset. I'll just give you it's not sharing my personal story, but most of my colleagues and friends remember me from that high school, university, and first years working, right? So whatever happened 20 years later, it's irrelevant because they're still thinking, oh, you're kind of this. So that's just the preconceived notions of me who's from here, but people coming, whether they're white, black, Latino, or from Africa, from South America, or India. Wow, you're dealing with a lot more.
Yes. And you know what, the path that I decided to take was to invest in myself. To invest in myself because I knew that I had to reinvent myself. I knew that the person that was in Mexico, the Veronica that was living in Mexico, right, that had a life there, wasn't the same that was here.
There's a Veronica. There's a very famous Veronica. There's a very famous Veronica on the Archie and Betty, the Archie, the comic series. You're like literally the only Veronica that I've come across since my days of reading comics. But no, so that Veronica had to repent. What did you do? To invest in yourself. Example, can you give some hard? I invested in myself and I talked to myself. No. What did you do, Veronica?
What did I do? Well,
what was the investment? What was the investment?
I took several courses.
Yeah.
On different things, right? On different things. Some were skills that were very practical. I could start by saying, like, I was taking courses on how to use LinkedIn, right? That was 2013 when LinkedIn was a relatively new thing. It was the only network that you could have.
That's
I will have things like that. And I will go also into getting some coaching in, realizing that somebody who
like football,
help me
like
try to figure out a personal coach, a life coach, and that I was working with. I got a mentor, right, and those things that were very practical, but would help me because what I needed was get clarity on my strengths, get clarity on my weaknesses, because I wanted to know what were the assets. And also the liabilities, right? Because that's part of it that I was bringing from Mexico to here, and how can I put them to use?
I'm just making some notes, but can we shout out to your first mentor? Do you have that first mentor? Do you have a line of them you want to bring into this?
Yes, my first mentor here was Bruce Randall and Jim Butko. There were two of my first mentors in here.
Okay.
And I don't think they're in LinkedIn. I just,
No, it's
my first mentor
interesting.
just retired 2 weeks ago, and I was there, and I had the opportunity to speak.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
just to say how
Thank you.
thankful I was, because he was we are very generously opened doors for me when everything was closing. And just, that you finding that person who actually is open a door for you and giving you some of their time just gives you hope. And there's those times that when you really need hope.
Yeah. Hope there's a hope believes in eternity or something like that. But so Tim and Randall, is it Tim and Randall? Like that?
No,
Like literally,
Jim
Jim.
and
Oh,
Bruce.
why did I have Randall in my head?
Because it's Bruce Randall. Yeah, he just retired. He's the
Okay.
executive director of Cryek. There's a new person now.
Yeah.
A new director.
Okay.
She just
So I mean,
started.
but did they weren't like handing you a fish and sort of here you go eat. They're like, okay, it's like that expression. If I give you a fish, I'll feed you for a day. But if I teach you how to fish, they were there to kind of how long? 2 months, 3 years? I mean, it sounds like they weren't just one day.
Jim was he was the academic head at Niagara College where I was
Oh,
working,
okay,
and
okay,
he was very he's very generous, as I said, with his giving me tips and kind of explaining me how things were done here. And then that was when I was living in Ontario. Then when I
yes,
came here, then it was Bruce who actually he was heading Cryek. Cryek is a non-for-profit organization here in Calgary that you probably heard about that.
no, I haven't.
Pairs mentors with mentees, and he was my
Okay,
mentor. And
Cryek.
he
How's
taught
it?
me, yes,
Cryek?
Cryek,
What?
CREEC.
Cryek. Okay, so it's a Calgary.
Yes, a Calgary Association. Yes,
Okay, I'd never heard of it.
I'm gonna start working with them as a mentor now, which is cool, right? Because
Which
I
is
started there as a mentee,
yeah,
and when I first came here, and they opened a lot of doors for me. Bruce will sat with me, and we'll just brainstorm, right? What are your assets? What can you do with them? How can you put them to work? How will you put them to serve? He
yeah,
introduced to me this concept of service leadership that I embrace really a lot, right? And then with him, I start working on how could I serve? How could I use my assets to
yeah.
serve others?
It's interesting. So the service leadership. So the it's called the Bank of Montreal or BMO Center of Advanced Leadership at University of Calgary. I don't know if that, but they have a mentor program, and I participated the first year. The second year didn't go so well, but it's the Haskane leadership. But they talked about
Mhm.
service leadership, so that's almost a two-way street. How can I service you? And I wasn't necessarily a two-way street, but it was that sort of leadership that they mentioned that several times, the service
Mhm.
leadership. So I'm glad to hear that that's out in the wild as well. That
Yes,
was,
yes.
yeah,
And it just gives you a different perspective, right? You start saying, how can I put these assets, these strengths that I have, these gifts? I like to call them gifts, right? This is what makes
yeah.
you special and what makes you unique. And how can you put them to work to serve other people?
So do you have an example of a few? Okay, so Bruce and sort of opening doors, and those are platitudes, but the specific, what can you say one thing that Bruce really did for, and we can go back to Jim as well, but what did one thing that Bruce did for you? Because it's different. He's not an academic, he's in the community.
Yeah, well, he sat down with me. Just that, just having somebody who will sat down with you and talk about what you were bringing to the table gives you clarity.
Yeah.
And I got very inspired of the work that he did with me. And that's part of the work that I do now.
Okay. So
I help.
you've taken that away. You've taken it off the table, and it's now on
Yes,
your shoulders, and you've shouldered
and
that.
that's actually what I said in that when I was speaking at his retirement. Uh, uh, I don't want to say party, it was like an event.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I said, right? I was so inspired by the work that he did with me that's what I do now. I help people figure out how they can serve, how they can lead, and what is their uniqueness? What do they bring to the table to make
It's
the world a better place?
it's interesting
Because
though.
that's
It's
it.
it's 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 literally because back to your experiences as a professor in back in Mexico, and others who've, again, I know they're doctors and lawyers or, different professions who come to Canada and they need a certificate. You mentioned French earlier, and I had a conversation with, someone about this woman's for 10 years with French language, wanted to start a course and didn't have the whatever. And I'm like, 10 years and you still couldn't penetrate that door. I'm like, just go start it online. Go and talk to your neighbors that they need French. That was just my simple level
Right.
of, instead of waiting 10 years for Alberta education or whoever it is. I don't know who makes that
It
decision.
depends. It depends.
If you can't go and work, go and create something. It just reminded me like, wow, you have the language ability and people need languages, and there's multiple languages. Canada is a multicultural country. It literally is.
It is.
So anyway, I don't want to go on too much, but when I came back to Canada, I went to the Harry Hayes building, probably August 2019, to get, visas and send everything, not visas, but all of our passports, everything in order. And there was an election going on in Canada, national election. I didn't see any reporters around. They didn't see interviewing people, but to me, that was a representative of Canada. All kinds of, new families. You could see the elderly. You could see this was a melting pot of Canadian right there at Harry Hayes building. I didn't see reporters interviewing them. I didn't see anybody around. To me, that was representative of the entire country in one building, in one floor, like it was packed. September 2000 or August 2019, packed. Nobody interviewing them, talking about what they think about the election or anything like that. I like, when you talk about that new immigrant arriving, they're all, that's, the election's about people, not about, the politics, and it's the people. So I'm not being political here. I'm just thinking, wow, I would have taken that opportunity to talk to, what are their issues? What are the stuff on the table? Like, what are the issues you're dealing with, right? Anyway, so I wanted to share that with you.
No, yes, thank you. That's true.
Okay, so I got you a bit distracted. So now you left Niagara College to come to Calgary. Was that to work with Bow Valley College or SAIT or the University?
I got a postdoctoral position at the University of Calgary.
Okay.
That's where I started, right? I was a postdoc there, and I was doing research and I was teaching, going back to teach.
Nice.
And yeah, so then I was there. Then later on, I got a different position with the university. And a couple of years ago, I decided to start my own business. My business is called Executive Mindset Coaching.
Yeah. And
I empower women to get more leadership positions. To tap the leaders that they have within, because I do believe that if we have more women in leadership positions, the world would be a better place.
Well, you did bring me to all these things. I was listening to a podcast about the failure of Toys R Us. And the guy said, I was looking around the boardroom and it was all men. But 50%, the women buy the toys. He said one of the probably reasons they probably failed, the guy said, is they didn't have enough women on that board of Toys R Us, making decisions on which toys should work, so that I think that's just a representative example of things where they just gone wrong, which is a very simple solution. Let's get more women in executive positions.
Right. And you know what, I was looking at some of the gender gaps, and for this year, the last report, there's different reports, and I found one where you can actually it is talking about the women in leadership by industry.
Yeah.
Right. And these are the global gender gap statistics. And we've always reached equality when it comes to governmental and membership organizations, not-for-profit. In not-for-profit organizations, we're almost there. It's like 47, education 46, personal services and well-being is like around 45. But then when we get to other type of industries, such as energy is 20%, manufacturing 19, infrastructure 16. Right, you just mentioned Toys R Us, like that's 0 right there. So and it depends. It has been increasing over time, but they are not being hired at equal rates just yet across industries.
I'm just trying to look for the podcast with it. Randine, she was Brandine Seaman was the founder of On It Inc. is an oil and gas services company, and she was fighting that. She said it. She said, I'm still fighting that the block of her.
Mhm.
She said she should learn the hard way of going to, I think it was Medicine Hat, and driving big construction vehicles. She had an engineering degree, but in the oil and gas field, she said it was constantly, it was an uphill battle to prove. And so
Right.
she's a leader in oil and gas in her profession, in her field, but she said it was a constant battle, but uphill battle to prove herself. I had another Megan Cotterill. She's a MMA 10 plus times champion in MMA. You know, she said, I still had to go out and prove I still felt, she said,
It's
I had to get the 11th. She had to win her 11th national or world championship in her title. So I understand. I don't understand it personally, but I do understand from listening to some women.
right. And
Yeah.
even in when you were talking about political representation, you were talking about some public office. So leadership in public office is even worse, right? Like even though in 2006 we had 9.9%. In 2022 is 16, so it doubled, but it's still 16, right? And the average woman in parliament went from 14 to 22, so now it's 22 and 16, which is still really low, right? So we're still far away from reaching this equality, gender equality. And you know what you're saying is absolutely true. I went the other day to a store, to a tech store, because I needed something fixed. And then it was this lady that was helping me. And she was very shy, and she was kind of a little bit, not so self-confident. And I told her, don't worry, I trust you, because for you to be here, when you look around, there's all men, you have to be twice as good and work twice as hard. Otherwise you wouldn't be here.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably expressions for what you just said there. You've to work twice as hard and to get twice, and not even the recognition, but VW sales lady. So the girl, her hashtag is Instagram VW sales girl or whatever it is. So I went to the VW last year. I had to get our car was stolen, so I had to go get a new car. She literally came here with the car.
Mhm.
I didn't know who was coming, right? Yeah, I'll come. It was just like a quick, I didn't realize she was a sales girl. I just thought it was a technician or whoever bringing the car to show it. So she'd been working for 7 years. I said, Alana, you have this opportunity, rare opportunity. She had recognized the tire. She recognized the size of our other. I said, you're seven. You could run ads saying, does your dad still help you buy your car? Does your boyfriend come with you to get the car? Does your uncle look at the, you mean there's always that guy, so for her, I think there's a great opportunity to kind of be that. So Veronica, you need to talk to her, please talk to her because, that's that power of knowing the knowledge, right? Simple thing of a car, that
Right.
knowledge, whether that tech girl, shout out to the world that she knows how to fix a phone because usually it's a guy, right?
Right. That is really, for her to be there, is that she's really good. Otherwise she
Wonderful.
wouldn't have been
Let's
hired,
get her on the
right?
pod. Let's bring her on the podcast, Veronica, and talk to her, right?
Oh,
We do enough.
I don't know if I want to find her, but I had a conversation with that day, right? But because
Yeah.
you know what is keeping Sheryl Sandberg was saying it like years ago when she first wrote her book Lean In.
Yeah.
She made great points in that book about how self-doubt will keep women from achieving their potential in their careers. And I see so much of that. That's why I decided to create this business, because I want to help women boost their self-confidence so they can really reach their potential in their careers, not only in their careers, in their lives. Because when you feel more self-confident, that just, it drips down to your community, to your work, to your family, and then to your kids, or if you have no kids, to your nieces, your nephews, your neighbors' kids, right? Everybody will see you there. So that is very important, because that women there's a lot of studies about that, like women and men that have more or less the same backgrounds, that have very different confidence levels.
Sure.
Like women tend to be lower in confidence when they have exactly the same background as a man. And I understand that that's a lot of the history that we had to walk to get where we are, right? Like we have, it's recent. It's recent. It's been what, 100 years that we're doing this, right? So it's just this change of mindset. And I, as a lawyer, I worked many years of I have articles on women's rights. I found the other day a speech that I won a contest of public speaking when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I was just cleaning up some papers and I found it. And I was probably 16, 17 when I wrote that. And it's about women empowerment. It's about women in university and the role the women can have in the world if they go to university. And then I didn't realize why I did that. And then going back to, doing a little bit of self work there, I realized I never for me, it was an aha moment, which was weird because I just kind of make it conscious a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And was like, why am I so passionate about this? About empowering women to go to leadership positions and to get better jobs and to go to university or to start their own business, right? If the school is not for them. And it's because I was the first woman in my family to go to university.
That's when it's an amazing story. Veronica, let's take a break there and we'll finish off, talk a little bit about your business and then we'll conclude. We'll let you conclude, but we'll take a quick break here. Okay.
Okay.